Good day. Thank you for joining us for today's news. If you find this helpful, please consider subscribing. We're here every day with calm, clear updates just for you.
The tragic death of 19-year-old cyclist Fyfa Dawson in 2019 has led to urgent calls for safer road design and more efficient coronial processes. Coroner Ruth Thomas highlighted failures in the traffic FIDA plan and recommended changes to improve cyclist safety as expressed deep sorrow and called for systemic reservice. The report goes the need for a risk-based approach in temporary traffic management to prevent similar in new vehicle standards to prevent similar incidents.
A 9-year-old cyclist named Fyfa Dawson lost her life in a tragic accident near Christchurch, where she was struck by a concrete truck while cycling through a roadworks site. A coroner's report has now revealed that the incident was largely due to flawed traffic management planning and a lack of safety measures. The absence of a gate controller at the work site was identified as a critical factor in the crash. Fyfa, described as an adventurous spirit by her mother, had cycled thousands of kilometers in the U.S. before the tragedy. Her death has sparked calls for changes in road safety protocols, including the use of adventure. The coroner's recommendations have been largely accepted, with the government and industry now working to implement safer practices for roadworks across the country.
A Uber driver in New Plymouth faced the loss of his job and passenger license after a stun gun was found on his dashboard during a traffic stop. The device made at home was discovered when police pulled him over for an unrelated issue. The court heard that the driver claimed the stun gun was a hobby project, not intended for use. However, the judge made it clear that carrying weapons, even as a form of self-protection, is not acceptable. The court acknowledged the challenges drivers face but ruled that there are better ways to handle dangerous situations. This case has raised questions about the safety of gig economy workers and the balance.
In a tragic incident on a New Zealand farm, an Irish seasonal worker was electrocuted when an excavator came into contact with overhead power lines. The coroner found that the employer had failed to provide adequate safety training and had not taken reasonable steps to pay reparations to the victim's family. The coroner has recommended updates to safety policies to prevent similar tragedies in the future. This case has raised discussions about the need for stronger health and safety regulations in the agricultural sector.
A man was found unresponsive in an Auckland park shortly before 2 a.m. following the activation of a burglar alarm at a nearby hardware store. Police are treating his death as unexplained and are continuing their investigation into the burglary. A post-mortem is scheduled for Thursday to help determine the cause of death. Authorities are also searching for another individual linked to the burglary. The incident has raised concerns in the community, prompting calls for improved safety measures and greater public involvement.
40 years after the sinking of the Greenpeace ship Rainbow Warrior, a new podcast series reveals shocking new details about the 1985 bombing investigative. Journalist Edwy Plenel claims that French President François Mitterrand gave the green light for the attack which killed one activist. The series features testimonies from high-ranking French officials, including Colonel Jean-Luc Kister, who says Mitterrand would have had to approve the operation. Despite promises of a full inquiry, the French government covered up its involvement, continued to hold power for another decade. This true crime series brings long-buried secrets to light, highlighting the need for transparency and accountability in government actions.
U.S. President Donald Trump has announced new tariffs on Indian goods, citing the country's continued imports of Russian oil. This move comes just before a new wave of tariffs takes effect, marking a significant escalation. In Trump's trade disputes, the 25% additional duty on Indian goods brings the total to 50% for many products. India has condemned the move as unfair, but Trump's strategy is clear: to isolate Moscow through economic pressure on its trade partners. Meanwhile, Brazil and other nations face their own tariff increases, with global leaders scrambling to avert the worst impacts as legal challenges loom as trade tensions reshape into maxes.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump has once again threatened federal control over Washington, D.C. after an attempted carjacking that injured a former Doge Worker, the attack has reignited Trump's low-cost trap. Trump's rhetoric has intensified as he calls for federal intervention. The incident has sparked debate over the safety of the nation's capital and the potential for federal takeover, with Trump's allies and critics alike reacting to the escalating situation.
In a sobering new study, scientists warn that the most devastating cyclones to hit New Zealand could become significantly wetter due to rising global temperatures linked to fossil fuel emissions. Research led by Peter Gibson, Pattiax from Earth Sciences New Zealand reveals that, under high emissions, cyclones could the end of the century. Even if global warming is limited to 2 degrees C, rainfall could still rise by 20%. The study used high-resolution climate models to simulate changes in the South Pacific, finding that extratropical cyclones may not become more frequent, that each storm will bring more intense rainfall, with the world on track to exceed temperature potence.
Gaza is in the midst of a devastating water crisis that's worsening by the day. Polluted aquifers and broken pipelines have left millions without access to clean water, forcing residents to walk long distances and wait in line for hours just to fetch a few liters of brackish water. According to aid agencies, the average daily consumption is far below the minimum emergency level with preventable waterborne diseases, but a new pipeline from Egypt is expected to take weeks to be connected. With the situation, that unfettered access for aid agencies are growing louder. The people of Gaza are fighting not just for survival, but for a future free from the devastation of war.
A heartbreaking car crash in Kaiko has left one child dead and several others injured. The incident occurred on Wednesday afternoon with a family involved in one of the vehicles. A child lost her life, and multiple occupants were injured. Emergency services rushed to the scene, transporting some patients to hospitals in serious. Police are appealing for witnesses, particularly those who may have seen a white Toyota Mark X being driven erratically before the crash. The community are reeling from the tragedy, and authorities are working to uncover the full details of the incident.
In New Zealand, the unemployment rate for Pacific people has surged 12.1%, more than double the national average. The Salvation Army warns that this trend could worsen, with young Pacific people struggling to find work as industries like construction and agriculture calming. Social policy analyst Anna Ika highlights the lack of job opportunities and the impact of tightened welfare. Apologies the economic.
80 years after the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, the city stands as a solemn reminder of the devastation caused by nuclear weapons. Thousands gathered to mark the anniversary, with the mayor urging world leaders to learn from the past and avoid a new arms race. The U.S. and Russia hold 90% of the world's nuclear warheads, and the mayor warns survivors, known as hibakusha, have faced discrimination for decades, and their numbers have now fallen below 100,000. As global tensions rise, the message from Hiroshima is clear: the horrors of nuclear warfare must never be repeated again.
St. John Ambulance, a vital part of New Zealand's emergency services, is making a tough call. They're cutting several community programs like hospital volunteers and pet therapy as part of a new 10-year strategy. It's not about money, they say, but about where they can have the biggest impact. With 1,100 volunteers currently helping in hospitals and rest homes, the organization is now looking to transition these services to other groups. They working closely with Tarariu. The move has sparked concern among some, but St. John insists the decision is necessary.
A senior nurse has been found guilty of illegally accessing the health records of over 180 individuals, including wireys, staff members, and even children and deceased people. At a retirement village where she worked, the nurse was found to have breached the terms of use of the digital health records system, and her actions were described as a siren on the penalties for the nurse at a later date.
That's all for today's news. We appreciate your time. If you enjoyed this update, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us keep going.